Now, thousands of Aer Lingus passengers are trying to rearrange their travel plans after an IT outage forced the cancellation of more than 50 flights. Deirdre Mulhern, who lives in Cavan, was in Rome waiting for her flight back to Dublin Airport on Saturday when she learned the news that all Aer Lingus services were cancelled. She spoke to our reporter Samantha Libreri about her experience.
We were in Rome City. We've been here for a week. We had seen things unfolding at home, so we were kind of wondering if it would affect us because we knew if flights weren't coming out, obviously flights weren't going to be there to bring us back. But we had no word from Aer Lingus about any such thing, so we turned up at the airport just before 4:30 for our 8:30 flight. With other people, we were there queuing, as you do, waiting for hours. We heard, I think it was from one of your tweets, Samantha, just people on social media finding out from Ireland that they were cancelling the flights from Europe back to Ireland as well. There was no Aer Lingus staff on the ground in Fiumicino Airport, and there was nothing up on the boards. All our Aer Lingus apps had still saying flight status going ahead.
How many hours were you in the airport, and how many hours before you realised that the flight was cancelled?
We were in the airport, I suppose, just 4 hours altogether. But it was a good 3 hours before we were told that the flight was cancelled.
And then what did you do?
Well, we had to wait around. There was 2 Italian representatives. There was no Aer Lingus staff on the ground at all. No one could get in touch with anyone from Aer Lingus. The whole time the app, our flight hadn't come up as cancelled until I'd say nearly 8:30. So we were wondering what was going to happen next. We were eventually told that by these 2 representatives that our Aer Lingus were going to get us a hotel and that transport would be arranged for us to get to a hotel.
And what happens now? When will you be able to get home?
Well, we were on the phone for 2 hours, 18 minutes last night here in the hotel. We couldn't get in touch with anybody, sending messages. We eventually were able to, once the Aer Lingus systems were back up and running, able to book ourselves on a flight for Tuesday morning. That was at 1 o'clock last night. So I applied for a refund then online with Aer Lingus for the flight that didn't happen. But I received an email this morning at 5:07 saying they had rebooked us on a flight for Thursday, which is just too far away and too late for us to return home. So I haven't had any contact with them since. I've sent several emails, been messaging their social media outlets and haven't been able to contact them on the phone to find out, to just to even let them know, do I go ahead and cancel their flight on Thursday or what should I do?
How have you found the whole experience?
Do you know, these things happen. Fair enough, they had a massive IT issue. The problem here with most people on the ground is the lack of presence and the lack of contact to reassure people of what's happening and that they were going to be looked after.
And what impact overall has this had on your holiday?
It does kind of put a dampener on. We were away for my wife's 50th, just the 2 of us. So it kind of does leave a bad taste in the mouth after the week.
Passenger Deirdre Mulhern there. For more on this, we're now joined by Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra. Good morning, Eoghan. What caused this problem?
Travel magazine. Good morning.
Good morning, Eoghan. What exactly caused this problem?
It was an outage. It was a cloud server. The system failed. The backup failed. Luckily enough for Aer Lingus, they had been through the first wave of flights on Saturday morning. Things could have been an awful lot worse. And from, in a period of about 45 minutes from 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, it became apparent that the web wasn't working, the check-in wasn't working. Everything would have to go back to pre-technology and have to be done manually. They had a lot of passengers to process. They got a lot of their flights away very late. They cancelled 55 of them, about 5,500, 6,000 passengers affected by cancelled flights, and they had stranded people in 12 cities across Europe on 17 flights. Really big drama in terms of the system breaking down, but as your interviewee Deirdre says, what added to the whole thing was their inability to communicate with their passengers.
So people whose flights are cancelled, they have two options. Firstly, accept compensation or otherwise wait for another flight. What exactly is the compensation situation? What can people expect to receive? What expenses and what rules apply?
Pretty fluid in terms of compensation, because the usual situation would be that the airline takes command, it puts you into hotels, it flies you home. Aer Lingus were clearly unable to do that. Their own systems, even tracking, communicating they couldn't even tell who was booked on what flight for a period there on Saturday. The precedent for this is that passengers who have made their own way home will be compensated for out-of-pocket expenses. So people like Deirdre who have booked their own flight, get on board, come home, find your own way back, and then chase Aer Lingus for the out-of-pocket expenses. I'd expect that to be a pretty straightforward process. And if it runs into trouble, there is an arbitrator. There's an arbitration process run by the flightrights.ie website. That is an officially appointed website. So that should be first stop for people who have difficulty getting their out-of-pocket expenses compensated.
And some people who are waiting to get home, they've been told, for example, in the case of people in Bulgaria, that they'll have to wait for a full week before they can get a flight which would be provided by Aer Lingus back to Ireland. In cases like that, are they paid a full week's accommodation?
Out of pocket will mean, as long as they're stranded, it is Aer Lingus' responsibility. They're contracted to bring you home. The Bulgarian situation is a bit fluid. I see two separate flights with the same flight number now on the system, and Aer Lingus are talking about using their transatlantic aircraft. That would be the larger Airbus 330, which has much more capacity to get out to Bulgaria and to some of the other destinations to get people back. They're not officially running rescue flights, going out empty to bring people home, but they are increasing capacity where they can. And they also have been dealing with other airlines. There is a question of, if you've booked with an alternative carrier, will you get compensated? I expect Aer Lingus to hum and haw a little bit about that, but certainly the precedent under consumer law is that customers are entitled to book with a competitor airline.
All right, Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel magazine, thanks very much for joining us.